Simon, I want to understand how reality is constructed. What are the pieces that we use to look at reality in its true sense, not just the superficiality that I see today?
Right.
Philosophy claims it can do that. How?
Some philosophers claim they can do that. I'm not sure that I would join them. Well, obviously we construct our world, or we describe our world by thinking about it, by having concepts, by having ideas about it. Those ideas may be more or less adequate. They may appear to contribute to our understanding, but they may not. Some of them may be delusive. And part of the job of the philosopher is to try to puzzle out which ideas are reliable, which ones we can trust, why we can trust the ones we can trust, and which ideas are perhaps best left behind us. So that's the basic topic. I think it's a little dangerous to presume at the outset that we construct our world. Some philosophers think that they're idealists, not in the sense of having particularly high ideals, but in the sense that they think that our ideas contribute to the nature of the world we experience. Other philosophers don't like the metaphor of construction. They think that we're receptive to the world rather than instrumental in constructing it. And so there's a big dispute, an old dispute there about the contribution of the mind to the reality it takes itself to inhabit. I think at a more sort of mundane level, it's very important that people should recognize the pervasive influence of ideas. Ideas very quickly become ideologies. And then people live in a sort of prism, or they live in a prison of their own making, and that's very dangerous. Let me give an example. In the last 30 or 40 years, we've all heard greed is good. Unfettered free markets are the way to go, the triumph of capitalism. 2008, suddenly the banks started to fail, and 2012, they're still failing, or they're still failing us. Now, what was wrong with the Thatcherite, Reagan, free marketeering ethos? Well, it was an ethos of particular ideas. People began to think that everybody's greedy, everybody's selfish, the only way to behave is to struggle to get to the top of the financial heap. That's the good life. But that's a very particular idea about the good life. It's denying the importance of society and social relations. It's denying the importance of a certain equality amongst people. And it's not by any means compulsory. It needs interrogation. You need to think about it. Even if you're convinced that those are the right ideas, you ought to know why they're the right ideas. And that's where philosophy comes in.
What is the problem of universals, where we have these general thingnesses, the idea of a cat, not any particular cat, but catness?
Sure, yeah.
And is this something that is out there in the world, or is it something that we construct in our minds?
I think there's probably different answers to that for different cases. Some philosophers would argue that you need to distinguish between natural kinds. So, for example, reality might just consist of, say, the different elements. That's a given. That's not something we construct. We find a world which has carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, sodium, and so on. Those are natural kinds of things, and perhaps biological kinds and natural kinds. On the other hand, there are things that seem much more, as it were, constructed by us. So if you think not in terms of scientific kinds of that sort, but in terms of, say, social kinds, take the notion of symphony, granted. The notion of symphony is clearly a very, very peculiar cultural construct, right? At a particular time in Western history, might go out of fashion, out of existence even. So there you've got an artificial kind, or a kind which is clearly much more a construction of our own. And of course, dispute is going to rage about exactly how you draw those boundaries.
But the fundamental question is in the first category, the natural kinds. Yeah. Are there any natural kinds? Right. Are there any at all?
They're much more obviously legitimate when you've got things that don't change. We think of the carbon atom, or for example, as something absolutely fixed. It's been with us since roughly the time of the Big Bang, or very shortly afterwards, and it's going to be with us until the world comes to an end. Something that changes, like, say, the concept of a mammal. Mammals have changed through evolution. They've changed from what they were 65 million years ago when they first arrived to what they are now, and they'll presumably change as time goes on. And then you get no sense of there being actual boundaries and kinds with particular cut-off points. You just get the sense of a kind of continuum in which things become tigers and then they stop being tigers.
The question is whether everything is in that category. A carbon atom ultimately in 10 to the Googleplex number of years will disintegrate and evaporate.
Sure.
So are there any
Change.
kinds that won't change, like a
Fixed kinds.
number, like the number 8 that won't change?
Yes. Well, the number 8's a very good example of something that won't change, because we don't think of it as having a physical existence at all. That's outside space and time, as they say. And of course, some philosophers say that means it doesn't exist at all. It's itself a construction. But certainly, insofar as we think about it as unchanging, as incapable of change. Yes, the question of whether there are any kinds like that in the physical world, I think, would almost certainly get the answer no from most people. Everything changes. Heraclitus is famous for saying you can't, the old Greek philosophers, famous for saying that you can't step into the same river twice, to which somebody replied, you can't step into the same river once. So there's just a world of flux out there. And the structure and order we impose on the world of flux seems to be very largely our own doing.
And you would agree with that?
I would agree with that. The difficulty is to stop it sliding into out-and-out idealism, that the whole world is as it were, just our own fantasy.
So where do you stop on the slippery slope?
I think that the world does throw enough at us for there to be better and worse ways of describing it. I think reality has a certain hardness about it. You can't just describe it how you like. And I think that we're evolved to describe it in terms which chime in with our needs. So, for example, I see in front of me a solid table. Well, it's very important to my life that I know which things are solid, that I have a reasonable sense of the environment around myself, and can see whether it contains threats or opportunities. And so I think nature has built me to categorize in terms of middle-sized dry goods, things which are solid, things which are shaped, things which are moving, things which are not, things which are living, things which are not. That's important to the way I and everybody else lives their lives. So I think some universals or some modes of categorizing the world are pretty much thrown at us. There's not much we can do about it.